what would your ideal client then be? Because they are, I mean, there is overlap between the two, but they are distinct things. So I wonder what your ideal client is that you're looking for.
Yeah. So we're looking for, if I get down to the really nitty gritty, what are we, because there's a difference between what's your ideal client, like who will you work with and won't work with, and who are you spending marketing dollars on, right?
And that's really what I'm getting at, because how do you market to that person? Because with it being the accountancy firm and then the law firm combined into one, so how does the marketing work?
So my ideal client is a professional service provider doing, over $1 million in revenue, ideally, closer to 5 million in revenue, and that needs ongoing services, right? So tax planning, entity structuring, transactional legal work, estate planning, those type of things they're all typically code-based, and they're all things we can do across state lines. So we're not doing any litigation on the accounting side. We're not doing any audits, not anything that would require us to be registered as a CPA firm. So tax prep, tax planning, CFO services, and then transactional legal work, contract review, and M&A deals.
Interesting. So you don't have to register as a CPA firm. You're able to kind of work around that.
Yeah, it's interesting how, we see this in a lot of different professions now, where you've got the traditional path to licensure, say for psychology, for example, to be a psychiatrist or psychologist, you've got to go through college, get a degree, take a test and become licensed. And then you can charge, whatever the market rate is or whatever the insurance reimbursement rate is. Whereas somebody else can go become a life coach or a, whatever personal development coach, executive coach.
And skip out
on all the formalities, probably make more money than the licensed professional, have a lot less risk, certainly much less regulation. We see the same thing in both these industries, both in accounting and in law. We see paralegals and legal document preparers who are coming up that can make good money, charge, market rates without ever having to step into a school or gotten any sort of credentialing, and certainly have no regulation for the most part. And then on the same side, within accountants, you've got bookkeepers and tax preparers. There are paralegal programs, right? But there's no real paralegal credential in most states. It's just kind of a self-proclaimed title, just like a bookkeeper or tax preparer is. If you say you're a bookkeeper, you're a bookkeeper. And then you can, if you're good at marketing and good at running a business, you can grow that business without ever having even thought about being a CPA.
Yeah. In St. Louis, I know this guy. He's a paralegal that has his own business cards. He's like a criminal defense paralegal, and he's got his own LLC. And I can't prove it, but I'm fairly certain he probably gives legal advice, so you really, it's hard to stop people like that. So it's one of those things where I think we all have to deal with it. Probably more so you do, more than anything. I'm curious how you manage the firm. Do you call it a firm or do you call it a company? Cause I'm curious, what do you call it?
Yeah, I call it a firm. So we are registered with the Supreme Court of Arizona as it's a type of law firm. The alternative business structure is.
Yeah.
And so we are under a lot of the same rules that a traditional law firm would be. Ironically, and I've actually written a thesis on this basically and presented it to the state board ABS committee. In Arizona, there's very little regulation of the law firms themselves. Most of the regulation efforts are focused on the attorneys themselves.
Okay.
So in Arizona, the attorney has to register every year, has to pay their dues, has to report their CLE. In Arizona, if you want to be a law firm, there's no registration. You just report the next time you file your annual affidavit, you report which law firm you work for, and you report at that point that you're self-employed, but there's no annual registration. There's no initial registration. There's no annual registration, and there's no fees to register a law firm in Arizona. There is no registration for a law firm in Arizona.
Yeah.
However, as an ABS, you have to pay $6,000 the first year to apply to be an ABS, and then $3,000 per year after that, along with essentially this whole audit process.
You still have to keep paying it every year?
Every year, yeah. And it's really interesting, the disparity between the regulation of law firms versus, an ABS. Whereas, frankly, I could do everything I do, within our ABS. I could do it as a traditional law firm. There's nothing that would prohibit me from preparing tax returns or doing bookkeeping through a traditional law firm. So our primary reason for being an ABS is the fact that I can have non-lawyer partners, which is a big deal for me. And that's really the only reason I need to be an ABS. Secondarily, it's a marketing tool for us to be able to say we're the first ones approved. I just heard a couple of days ago, KPMG, one of the big four accounting firms, just applied to be an ABS in Arizona. This is something I've been predicting is going to, will be happening across the country. We're going to see, we see legislation right now in Utah. They've got the sandbox rules. And then I believe Washington State has some proposed legislation allowing the ABS structure. And we're going to see more and more of the big players, the accounting firms and other ancillary professional service providers that are going to want to start playing in Arizona because, if you're licensed as an ABS in Arizona, you can do certain transactional legal work across borders without being licensed there, as long as you're not representing a client in front of a tribunal and, basically going to court. There's a lot of stuff you can do.
It's interesting that they've got that barrier to entry, the 6,000 up front and then 3,000. My guess is, and maybe you know better than I do, is that I'm guessing that's just to kind of keep the riffraff out. It's at a certain number that's just high enough just to make sure that, some, little bitty dinky firm out of another state that's not very organized, they're not going to come in and pay $6,000 and then pay $3,000 a year to get this set up. Is my guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's a little bit opportunistic in some ways too. I think we're the first ones to do this.
Yeah.
And I applaud the state bar for thinking like business owners, because if you can charge fees and people will pay them, then might as well. They have costs, that they have to cover to administer the service. There's a committee and there's people that all they do is ABS compliance.
Oh, wow.
And so, they have costs that have to be covered too. But I just think the disparity between the regulation of law firms and ABS is pretty interesting.
The only thing that surprised me about KPMG coming in is that it took so long. I'm surprised it's taking so long for these companies to come in, because it seems like it would be a cash cow for them.
Yeah, I think there's those are giant ships that are hard to steer, right?
Sure.
And so, having been at big four firms, I actually interned at KPMG when I was a kid, and then spent several years at Ernst & Young, and I know how the decision-making process is. They're like their own governments, right? These are very slow decision-making. They're not agile. They can't run like a small firm where you can make a decision and go for it. It's probably been something they've been looking at for years, and then finally got, some committee to approve.